Your willpower is the most important thing in your life because regardless of who you are, what you do, or what interests you have, you use it every single day. And you use your willpower to do really important things. Things like tackle your biggest goals, maintain social relationships, and you're even using it right now to focus on this video. So the question then becomes, if willpower is so important, then what exactly is it and how do you control it? Is it something that is linked to an organ or a resource within your body? Or is it merely something that's all in your head? Well, as it turns out, the answer is actually both, because your willpower is very strongly linked to your blood glucose levels. However, your thoughts and emotions will have a very big impact on your willpower as well. And we're going to learn all about it right now. Willpower is defined as impulse control or self-regulation, and it's really just the ability for you to use conscious effort to modify your automatic or habitual responses to stimuli. Now, it comes in many different forms, so whenever you are altering your thoughts, emotions, desires, or behaviors, you are actually using up willpower. So let's take a real-world example. Let's say that you are in an argument with another person, and as humans most often do during these arguments, you are holding back your tongue because you don't want to escalate the situation. Now, what you may not realize is that by doing this, you are actually draining a substantial amount of your willpower. And you're doing that in two ways. The first way is because you are altering your behaviors by not speaking what's really on your mind. And the second way is because you're altering your emotions because you are presumably suppressing feelings of either dejection, anger, or let's be honest, most likely both. Now, this can have very, very big consequences because if you then try to do a very willpower intensive task after the argument, such as studying for a final exam or going to work, you'll find that it is much more difficult for you to complete that task simply because you just depleted a whole bunch of your willpower reserves during the argument. Now, you may have heard that said before, that your willpower is a depletable resource, at least that you have a finite amount of willpower available in any given day. The most oft-given metaphor is to compare willpower to be akin to a muscle, whereby the more you use the muscle, the more fatigued it gets and the weaker it becomes. Now, this is true, but what you may not have heard is that your willpower is very strongly linked to your blood glucose levels and the ability for your body to transport glucose to your brain. So this means that if you have an insufficient level of glucose within your body, it's going to be very hard for you to do willpower demanding tasks. And dozens of studies out there have demonstrated this relationship, but I want to give you just two examples right now. And the first example tested participants' willpower with freshly baked cookies. Now, the first group was allowed to eat and indulge in these freshly baked cookies when they were presented with them. The second group, however, had to resist eating the freshly baked cookies. Afterwards, both groups were tasked with completing the same similar puzzle. And the results found that the group who had to resist eating the cookies did far worse on this puzzle simply because they used up a lot of their willpower in initially resisting the cookies. Now, the second study started by testing participants' willpower by having them focus on a short video. And remember that by focusing your attention on anything, including a video, you use up a little bit of your willpower. And after this video, participants had to complete a Stroop task. Now, a Stroop task is where a color is spelled out, but the color font is different than what is actually spelled out. And this discrepancy can be very confusing to the brain, right? It takes a lot of willpower for it to differentiate. Now, the results found that the participants who used up less willpower on the video had more willpower available and thus did better on the Stroop task. So in both of these studies, you may have noticed I said willpower a lot. If you replace the word willpower with the word glucose, then you actually have a more accurate idea of what's really going on inside your body. But this may make you wonder, why exactly is glucose the resource that your body has chosen to use as the willpower fuel source? Well, the reason is this. Glucose is actually the primary resource that your brain uses for fuel. Now, your brain uses up more fuel than does any other organ in your body relative to its size. But you have to remember that some areas of your brain will actually use up more of this resource, more fuel, than will other areas. So when you perform autonomic functions, things like breathing or regulating your body temperature or heart rate, these use up relatively little fuel when compared to areas like your prefrontal cortex. Now, your prefrontal cortex is an especially important area in your brain because that regulates things like your decision making and your behaviors. And this is thought to be the area where most of your willpower comes from. So, whenever you exercise willpower, you are really activating your prefrontal cortex and are thus burning up a lot of fuel and a lot of glucose. Think of it this way. whenever you're doing autonomic functions, it's like you're driving a very fuel-efficient car or a Prius. But whenever you are using willpower, it's more like you're driving a rocket ship and are burning a metric ton of fuel. Now, knowing this, you may think that the solution is just to pop some glucose tablets every day, keep your willpower reserves on high, and just have infinite willpower with infinite glucose. Unfortunately, it doesn't really work that way because the relationship between willpower and glucose isn't really linear. So instead of being a one-to-one relationship, it's more of an enough versus an inadequate amount. And this simply means that if you have inadequate levels of glucose, then raising your levels up to enough, that's certainly going to help. That's going to give you more willpower. However, if you go anywhere above enough, that's not necessarily going to yield in better results, and you won't necessarily get more willpower out of this. Also, you have to remember that things like your mood, the time of day, and how well rested you are will also have a big impact on your willpower as well. And all of this brings us to the second biggest impactor on your willpower besides glucose, and that is your thoughts and beliefs on willpower itself. Now, a recent study demonstrated this by having participants be in two different groups. In the first group, they told the participants that their willpower was an unlimited and infinite resource. However, in the second group, participants were told that their willpower is very limited and a finite resource. The results found that the group who thought their willpower was unlimited did far better on every single willpower task, and they were able to exercise their willpower for far longer than were the participants in group 2 who thought their willpower was finite. Now, the exact reason behind this is because humans are innately very bad at estimating our own willpower depletion levels. In other words, we can't really say what our blood glucose levels are within our body, at least very accurately, just by feeling it out. So, if you think that your willpower is a finite and depletable resource, then you're just more likely to use this as an excuse to give up at the first sign of fatigue. It's like when you're in the gym. You don't give up at the first sign of your muscles burning. Likely what you'll do is you'll go a few extra reps, or at least go till failure, and then go from there and stop when your muscles are really ready to stop. Now, the study demonstrated that the same thing happens with your willpower. If you believe that it is an infinite resource, then you can't use that as an excuse. You can't just say that, oh, my willpower levels have reached an inadequate level, I'm feeling some fatigue, I'm gonna give up. Instead, you will only give up when your willpower resource has actually reached an inadequate level, when your glucose levels are so low that you really can't continue. And this effectively means that you're going to be more efficient and use your willpower resource better than if you think it's a finite resource. Now, we've gone over a lot of information here, so given all of this research and what we now learn about willpower, I'd like to give you 5 very practical tips that you can start using today to increase your willpower, or at least make it more consistent. And the first tip starts by always eating a healthy breakfast that is high in glucose. And this is because just the same way that you'd fill up your car's fuel tank when it's on empty, you want to make sure that your glucose levels and willpower start at the optimum level at the start of each day. Now, the second tip is to make sure that you are focusing on being in a good mood rather than focusing on simply increasing your willpower. Because if you are in a good mood, studies have shown that you are more likely to overcome willpower depletion effects. This means that you will use your willpower more efficiently and it will last longer. The third tip is to connect your tasks to a very core belief, something that is very important to you and means a lot to you. Studies again have shown that this will help you overcome willpower depletion effects, because if you believe you are doing something for your own benefit, rather than because someone told you to do it because you think you have to do it, then you are more likely to overcome these depletion effects. Very important, very subtle principle. And the fourth tip is that if you actually do start getting fatigued, and you probably will, and you feel your willpower draining, then that's okay. Take a break, but make sure to eat a healthy snack that is high in glucose. Snacks like bananas, apples, and grapes are all great examples. And the fifth and final tip is, just as much as possible, try to convince yourself that your willpower is truly an unlimited resource, or at least that you have a very big fuel tank. Because by doing this, again, you will be able to overcome those willpower depletion effects, and you will only give up when your willpower reserves have actually reached an inadequate level and you're truly ready to give up. Now, I've also created a free tool to help you manage your willpower and get the most out of your willpower. I call it my custom habit tracking spreadsheet. It's a free spreadsheet, and it allows you to create your own customized habit tracking spreadsheet with zero spreadsheet experience. It's very cool. The link is in the description below. Again, it's free. Check it out and let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching. Post your comments, your thoughts, what you think about this video and glucose in the comments below. and I'll catch you next video. Thank you.